Ambassador Lee Minho felt his stomach drop as the alien transport ship shuddered through hyperspace. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment. His hands gripped the diplomatic briefcase tighter, knowing it contained Earth's most crucial trade proposal. Inside were detailed plans for mineral extraction rights, colony protection agreements, and technology exchanges that could change humanity's future forever. The Kalarian Empire had finally agreed to direct negotiations after countless messages sent through nervous intermediary species. Most aliens were terrified of the Kalarians, whispering stories of entire civilizations that had simply vanished after displeasing them. But Earth needed their rare minerals desperately. Human colonies were expanding faster than anyone had expected, and without those resources, dozens of worlds would remain barren rocks floating in space. Minho pressed his face against the transport's viewing port as they approached the Kalarian capital world. His breath caught in his throat. The planet looked like a giant jewel spinning in space, covered in massive crystal spires that stretched into the clouds. Some of the towers were so tall they disappeared into the atmosphere. Ancient ships, sleek and deadly, patrolled in perfect formations around the world. "First time seeing a Kalarian world, human?" asked his escort, a grey-skinned alien with too many eyes. The creature's voice carried obvious amusement. "Your species has been in space for what, barely 200 years? The Kalarians built those spires before your ancestors discovered fire." Minho nodded politely but said nothing. He had studied everything available about Kalarian culture. They valued age, tradition, and power above all else. To them, humans were newcomers who had appeared in the galaxy yesterday. Most Kalarian nobles considered it beneath their dignity even to acknowledge human existence. The transport docked at a massive space station orbiting the planet. Minho was escorted through corridors filled with aliens from dozens of species, all waiting for audiences with Kalarian officials. Some had been waiting for years. The walls displayed holographic records of Kalarian military victories stretching back thousands of years. Conquered worlds, defeated fleets, and surrendered armies filled every surface. Ambassador Lee, a tall, pale Kalarian, approached him. The alien wore robes that seemed to shift colors in the light. "I am Counselor Vexitar. The High Council will see you now." Minho followed the counselor through security scanners that made his skin tingle. Guards in powered armor watched his every move. Their weapons looked advanced enough to vaporize a small building. Everything about the place was designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. The Grand Council chamber took his breath away. The room was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed real-time images of all 17 Kalarian worlds. Hundreds of alien species were represented by holographic ambassadors floating around the chamber's edges. At the center sat the High Council, 12 ancient Kalarians on thrones that floated above the floor. "Remember," Minho whispered into his hidden comm device before the signal was blocked, "we need this treaty. Stay calm. Stay diplomatic." Back on Earth, President Park Sora paced nervously in her office high above New Sol. Multiple screens showed news feeds from across human space. Colony ships waited at launch points, their holds empty because they lacked the materials needed for planetary development. Mining operations on 17 worlds had been shut down, waiting for Kalarian approval to continue. "Any word from Ambassador Lee?" she asked her aide, Kim Yuna. "The signal was cut off when he entered the council chamber," Yuna replied. "That's normal for Kalarian security protocols." Sora stared out her window at the bustling city below. Millions of humans lived and worked there, completely unaware that their future depended on one man's ability to convince an ancient alien empire to treat them as equals. The irony wasn't lost on her. Earth had united all of humanity under one government for the first time in history, but they still had to beg aliens for permission to expand among the stars. Her secure phone buzzed. Admiral Kim Dojan's face appeared on screen. "President Park, our deep space monitoring stations are detecting unusual Kalarian fleet movements. 3 battle groups have moved to positions near our outer colonies." "Are they threatening us?" Sora asked, unknown. "But they're in position to blockade our major shipping routes if they wanted to." Sora closed her eyes. The Kalarians were making a point. They held all the cards, and they wanted Earth to know it. Human military forces were impressive, by Earth standards, but compared to an empire that had ruled the galaxy for millennia, they were insignificant. "Keep monitoring," she ordered, "and pray that Minho can work his diplomatic magic." The entire future of human expansion rested on one man's shoulders, standing in an alien council chamber, surrounded by species that considered his people primitive. Newcomers barely worth their time. The first 2 days of negotiations had gone better than anyone had hoped. Ambassador Lee Minho sat across from the Kalarian High Council, carefully presenting Earth's proposals. The aliens listened with what seemed like genuine interest, as he explained humanity's need for rare minerals and their willingness to share advanced medical technology in return. Councillor Vexitar had even smiled when Minho demonstrated a human healing device that could regrow damaged tissue in minutes. Several council members leaned forward, clearly impressed by the small machine's capabilities. For the first time in 3 years, it looked like Earth might actually get the treaty they desperately needed. "Your species shows promise," High Councillor Zethmore had said on the second evening. "Perhaps we have underestimated human ingenuity." Minho had returned to his guest quarters feeling hopeful. He sent a coded message to Earth through the diplomatic channels, telling President Park Sora that the negotiations were progressing well. That night he slept better than he had in months, but while Minho slept, Kalarian intelligence operatives were analyzing every piece of data they could gather about Earth. Their spy networks reached across the galaxy, gathering information from merchant ships, mining stations, and trading posts. What they discovered in the early hours of the third day changed everything. Kalarian Intelligence Commander Nalvex burst into the High Council chamber before dawn, her multiple arms carrying data tablets and holographic projectors. "Council. Members," she announced urgently, "we have a problem." The emergency session convened immediately. Holographic displays filled the chamber, showing detailed scans of human space. What the Kalarians saw made their blood run cold with rage. Hidden shipyards throughout the solar system contained hundreds of military vessels. Massive defense platforms guarded every major human world. Most shocking of all were the weapon signatures detected on these ships, technology that rivaled their own ancient arsenal. "The humans lied to us," snarled High Councillor Zethmore. His calm demeanor from the previous day had vanished completely. "They presented themselves as peaceful colonizers desperate for our help. But look at this fleet. Look at these weapons. They could challenge a dozen lesser species." Councillor Vexitar studied the data with growing fury. Ambassador Lee spoke of small colony ships and mining equipment. He never mentioned battle cruisers or planetary bombardment systems. "He made fools of us," another council member hissed. "No species deceives the Kalarian Empire and lives to tell others about it." The decision was unanimous. Humanity needed to learn their place in the galactic order. The other species watching these negotiations needed to see what happened when someone tried to trick the Empire. At dawn on the third day, 12 Kalarian guards in full combat armor stormed into Minho's quarters. The ambassador was eating breakfast, reviewing his notes for the day's final negotiations. He looked up in confusion as the guards surrounded him, their weapons charging with deadly energy. "Ambassador Lee Minho of Earth," the guard captain announced. "You are under arrest for espionage, deception, and crimes against the Kalarian Empire." "What? I don't understand," Minho protested as energy restraints locked around his wrists. "We were making such good progress. What's happened?" They dragged him through the corridors as other alien diplomats watched in shock. News of the human ambassador's arrest spread through the station within minutes. Species that had been considering their own negotiations with Earth suddenly backed away, terrified of being associated with whatever the humans had done. The trial was held in the same grand chamber where negotiations had taken place just hours before. But now it was filled with Kalarian citizens who had been brought to witness human deception being punished. Massive screens showed the proceedings to every world in the Empire. "You stand accused of lying about your species' military capabilities," High Councillor Zethmore declared. "You presented Earth as weak and peaceful while hiding a massive war fleet." Minho tried to defend himself. "Those ships are for defense only. We've never attacked anyone. We came here seeking peaceful trade." "Silence," Vextar snapped. "Your Deception ends now. The galaxy will see what happens to those who think they can fool the Kalarian Empire. The evidence they presented was overwhelming. Satellite images of human shipyards, detailed scans of military vessels, and intercepted communications between Earth military commanders. It painted a picture of humanity as aggressive expansionists, hiding behind a mask of diplomatic innocence. The verdict was delivered within hours. Guilty on all charges. The sentence was death, to be carried out immediately and broadcast across the Empire as a warning to other species. What followed was designed to break human spirit completely. The execution was slow and public, meant to humiliate not just Minho but all of humanity. They wanted Earth to see their ambassador suffer, to understand how powerless they truly were. When it was over, they placed Minho's remains in a simple recycling container used for organic waste. No diplomatic courtesy, no respectful return of the body. Just garbage to be disposed of. The message they sent with the container was brief and insulting. This is how we deal with liars. Know your place. The Kalarian High Council expected Earth to immediately send apologies and pleas for mercy. They expected humanity to abandon their colonies and retreat back to their home system in shame. They expected fear, submission, and complete surrender to Kalarian authority. They had no idea what was really coming. The container arrived at Earth's main diplomatic station 3 days after Ambassador Lee Minho's execution. President Park Sora received the call at 4 a.m., her secure phone buzzing with the emergency tone reserved for the worst possible news. The Kalarian transport ship had dropped the container at the edge of human space and immediately jumped back to hyperspace without any communication. Station Commander Lee Jinwoo's voice was shaking when he called, "Madam President, we've received Ambassador Lee's remains. The medical team confirms it's him. The condition is..." His voice broke. "It's deliberate, ma'am. They wanted to send a message." Within hours, emergency sessions were called across every human government. Colony administrators from the outer rim worlds connected via quantum communication. Links. Military commanders who had been quietly preparing for this possibility were summoned from their hidden bases. The United Earth Assembly, representing every nation and settlement, gathered in the grand chamber beneath New Sol. President Park Sora walked into that chamber carrying the small metal container herself. 2 billion people watched the live broadcast as their leader, usually calm and diplomatic, struggled to maintain her composure. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the container on the podium. 3 days ago, our friend Lee Minho was murdered, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The chamber was so quiet that people could hear their own heartbeats. He went to the Kalarian Empire with hope for peace, carrying our dreams of cooperation and mutual respect. She lifted the container. They sent us back our friend in pieces. They recorded his death and broadcast it across their empire like entertainment. They think this makes them strong. They think this makes us weak. Her voice grew harder with each word. They are wrong on both counts. The silence that followed was broken by Representative Kim Nari from the Mars colonies. She stood slowly, her face pale with rage. "I call for a declaration of war against the Kalarian Empire." "Seconded," came voices from across the chamber. Within minutes, every representative was on their feet. The vote was called immediately. All in favor of declaring war. Every hand rose, every voice called out yes, in a thunderous roar that shook the building. Representatives from Earth, Mars, the Jupiter mining stations, the Outer Rim colonies and the Deep Space research facilities, all unanimous. 2 billion humans speaking with one voice. The vote count appeared on screens across human space. 847 for war, 0 against, 0 abstaining. Admiral Kim Dojin was eating lunch in his office when the priority communication came through. The holographic display showed President Park Sora's face, but something had changed in her expression. The diplomatic mask was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Admiral, you have your authorization," she said simply. "Execute Plan Omega. Show them what happens when they murder our people." Dojin had been waiting for this call for 3 years. He stood and activated the command codes that had been locked away since the fleet's construction began. "All stations, this is Admiral Kim. Authorization Omega is confirmed. Begin fleet activation." Across the solar system, hidden shipyards that had been operating in the shadows suddenly blazed with activity. Near Jupiter's moons, massive dry docks opened to reveal warships that made alien vessels look like toys. The construction had taken place in complete secrecy, using mining operations as cover. The first ship to emerge was the TDS Defiance, Admiral Dogen's flagship. 1 kilometer long and bristling with weapons that human engineers had spent decades perfecting. Its hull was covered in armor plating that could absorb energy weapons, and its engines could push it through hyperspace faster than anything the Kalarians had ever built. Behind it came the strike cruisers, Thunder, Lightning, Storm, and Tempest. Each one carried enough firepower to level a city. Their crews were hand-picked veterans from Earth's military academies, trained in combat tactics that no alien species had ever seen. The heavy assault ships followed, Hammer, Anvil, and Forge. These massive vessels were designed for one purpose: breaking through enemy defenses and delivering devastating attacks on fortified positions. Their weapons had been tested in the asteroid belts, turning kilometer-wide rocks into cosmic dust in seconds. Near Mars, the stealth destroyers powered up their experimental cloaking systems. Shadow, Phantom, and Ghost became invisible to most. Sensors designed to slip behind enemy lines and strike without warning. Their crews were specialists in covert operations, trained to think like predators stalking prey. But the most impressive sight was near Earth's moon. The massive shipyard doors opened to reveal humanity's newest creation, the TDS Retribution. This ship was in a class by itself, designed not just to fight, but to serve as a mobile command center for entire fleets. Its weapons could crack planets, and its armor could withstand almost anything the galaxy could throw at it. Captain Choi Gina stood on the bridge of her cruiser, watching the fleet assemble. She had lost friends in the early days of human space exploration, killed by pirates and hostile aliens who thought humans were easy targets. Today felt like justice finally arriving. "All ships report ready, Admiral," she transmitted to the flagship. "Excellent," came Dogen's reply. "Set course for Kalarian space, maximum speed." The Kalarians had made one critical error in their calculations. They had seen humanity's diplomatic efforts and assumed humans were just another peaceful species, trying to join galactic civilization through negotiation and trade. They thought Earth's military was small and defensive, designed only to protect their home system. They had no idea that humans were the species that had survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, and 2 world wars on their home planet. They didn't understand that humanity had united not through peace, but through learning that sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to hit back harder than they hit you. Most importantly, they didn't realize that humans had spent their entire history being very, very good at war. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth had conquered their hostile homeworld and reached for the stars. The lesson would be written in Kalarian blood. The attack began at exactly 800 Galactic Standard Time across 17 star systems simultaneously. Kalarian patrol ships were conducting their routine morning sweeps when space itself seemed to tear open around them. Massive human warships dropped out of hyperspace with surgical precision, their weapons already charging for combat. Admiral Kim Dogen stood on the bridge of the TDS Defiance, watching tactical displays that showed the coordinated assault unfolding across Kalarian space. Years of planning and preparation were finally paying off. Every ship knew its target. Every captain understood their mission. "Admiral, all strike groups report successful hyperspace insertion," reported Communications Officer Park Hyeri. "No enemy forces detected our approach." "Perfect," Dogen replied. "Signal all captains. Execute Phase 1. In the Kalarian capital, System. Captain Choi Gina's task force materialized just outside the planet's defensive perimeter. Her 3 cruisers, Thunder, Lightning, and Storm, moved in perfect formation while the stealth destroyers vanished from sensors entirely. "Captain, enemy orbital platforms are powering weapons," warned her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim Woo-jin. 36 heavy defense stations, each one larger than our biggest cruiser. Gina smiled grimly. "They built those stations to scare pirates and intimidate weaker species. Let's show them what real firepower looks like. All ships target the command station first." The Thunder's main cannon charged with a sound like rolling thunder. Human engineers had designed these weapons after studying every alien technology they could acquire. The result was devastating beyond anything the Kalarians had imagined possible. The energy beam that erupted from Thunder's bow was brilliant white, containing enough concentrated power to level a mountain. It struck the central defense platform and simply erased it from existence. One moment there was a massive space station bristling with weapons. The next, there was only expanding debris and shocked silence. "Impossible," whispered Kalarian Defense. Commander Texavar from his command center on the planet's surface. "No ship that size should have weapons capable of destroying a fortress station in one shot." But the humans were just getting started. Lightning and Storm opened fire simultaneously, their beams carving through Kalarian defenses like cutting torches through paper. Within minutes, half the orbital platforms were gone, their crews never knowing what hit them. Meanwhile, the stealth destroyers had slipped past the remaining defenses and were targeting the planet's communication arrays. Without warning, massive explosions erupted across the capital world's surface as military satellites and ground-based transmitters were destroyed by precisely placed missiles. "We've lost contact with 14 outer systems," reported a panicked Kalarian officer. "Something is jamming all our long-range communications." Commander Texvar tried to maintain order as his forces crumbled around him. "Launch all fighters. Deploy the battle fleet. Show these humans the power of the Empire." 200 Kalarian fighter craft streamed out of hidden hangars, their pilots confident in ships that had dominated space battles for centuries. They had superior numbers, better shields, and weapons that had never failed them before. They had never fought humans. Captain Gina watched the enemy fighters approach and activated her ship's point defense systems. Hundreds of small automated turrets emerged from Thunder's hull, each one controlled by advanced targeting computers that could track dozens of targets simultaneously. The Kalarian fighters had barely entered weapons range when the human ships opened fire. But instead of the traditional energy beams they expected, the humans used something entirely different. Thousands of small projectiles erupted from the point defense guns, creating walls of deadly metal that the fighter craft flew directly into. The ancient alien pilots had never encountered kinetic weapons before. Their energy shields, designed to deflect lasers and plasma bolts, were useless against simple chunks of metal, traveling at incredible speed. Fighter after fighter exploded as the projectiles tore through their hulls. "What kind of weapons are those?" Commander Texvar demanded as he watched his entire fighter wing being destroyed. "Kinetic interceptors," his intelligence officer replied, studying the tactical data. "They're firing solid projectiles instead of energy. Our shields can't stop them." "Then deploy the battle fleet immediately." The Kalarian Empire's most powerful warships rose from the planet's surface, massive vessels that had conquered dozens of worlds. Each one was twice the size of the largest human ship, covered in armor that had withstood centuries of battles. Admiral Dojun watched them approach with calm interest. "Captain Gina, you have multiple capital ships incoming. Do you require assistance?" "Negative, Admiral," came Gina's reply. "Thunder Squadron can handle this. We've been waiting 3 years to test our new toys." The human cruisers spread out into attack formation as the Kalarian dreadnoughts closed in. The aliens opened fire first, massive energy cannons sending bolts of destructive force toward the human ships. But the humans had learned from every battle in their violent history. Thunder, lightning, and storm moved like dancers, their pilots using maneuvers that no alien had ever seen. They rolled, spun, and dove through space, avoiding most of the enemy fire while closing the distance rapidly. When the human ships finally returned fire, the results were devastating. Their weapons didn't just damage the Kalarian vessels, they cut through them like knives through cloth. Advanced human targeting systems found weak points in alien armor and exploited them with surgical precision. The largest Kalarian dreadnought, flagship of their home defense fleet, lasted exactly 47 seconds against Thunder's concentrated fire. Its 1,000-year-old hull was no match for weapons designed by a species that had perfected the art of destroying things. Within 2 hours, the Kalarian capital system's defenses were completely destroyed. The human fleet began its final approach. To the planet itself, their weapons trained on the crystal palace that had ruled 17 worlds for millennia. "This is Captain Choi Gina of the Terran Defense Fleet," she broadcast on all frequencies. "You have exactly 10 minutes to evacuate the High Council chamber before we reduce it to atoms. This is your only warning." The Kalarians, who had never retreated from anything in their empire's history, ran for their lives. At exactly 10 minutes and 1 second, Thunder's main cannon fired once more. The crystal palace that had stood for 3,000 years vanished in a flash of white light. Similar scenes played out across all 17 Kalarian systems as human strike forces demonstrated the difference between ruling through fear and fighting with purpose. The Empire's forces, designed to intimidate rather than battle determined enemies, crumbled within hours. By the end of the first day, 12 Kalarian worlds had surrendered. By the end of the week, their empire was begging Earth for mercy. Other, alien civilizations watched in stunned silence as humanity showed the galaxy exactly why their species had survived every disaster their violent homeworld could throw at them, then reached for the stars anyway. The lesson was simple: never mistake human preference for peace as inability to wage war. The surrender came on the 7th day of what galactic historians would later call the Human Storm. High Counselor Zethmore, the same alien who had ordered Ambassador Lee Minho's execution, now knelt in the ruins of his crystal palace with his hands bound by human energy restraints. The Kalarian Empire formally surrenders all military assets and territorial claims, he announced through gritted teeth as human soldiers watched him from behind their advanced armor. "We accept full responsibility for the murder of your ambassador and request mercy." President Park Sora watched the broadcast from Earth, her face showing no emotion. After 6 days of watching human fleets dismantle an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, she felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The aliens who had sent back her friend in pieces were now begging for their lives. The War Crimes Tribunal convened on Lunar Station 3 weeks later. Representatives from dozens of alien species attended, many of them former victims of Kalarian aggression, who had waited centuries for justice. The evidence against the Empire's leadership was overwhelming, not just for Minho's murder, but for countless atrocities committed across their territory. Judge Kim Tae-hyung, Earth's top military prosecutor, read the charges in a voice that carried across the packed courtroom. Crimes against sentient beings, murder of diplomatic personnel, terrorism and systematic oppression of subject species. The evidence shows a pattern of cruelty spanning over 1,000 years. The trials lasted 2 months. One by one, Kalarian war criminals were sentenced to life imprisonment on remote human prison colonies. Their empire was formally dissolved, its 17-member worlds granted immediate independence. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity showed mercy to defeated enemies, something the Kalarians had never done. But the reparations were another matter entirely. Earth's demands were calculated to cripple any future Kalarian military ambitions while compensating humanity for their losses. Advanced technology, rare minerals and massive financial payments flowed toward human space. "Every credit will go toward protecting innocent life," President Park announced to the Galactic Assembly. "New colonies, better defenses, and research stations that will benefit all peaceful species." The construction of Minho Station began immediately in the former Kalarian capital system. Human engineering teams worked alongside alien contractors, building something the galaxy had never seen before, a massive diplomatic and research complex that would serve as humanity's embassy to the stars. The station was enormous, designed to house representatives from every known species. Its central spire reached into space, topped with a memorial chamber containing Ambassador Lee Minho's personal effects. Advanced laboratories filled the lower levels, where human and alien scientists worked together on projects that would benefit everyone. Captain Choi Gina oversaw the station's military defenses personally. "This is a place of peace," she told her construction crews, "but it will be protected by the finest weapons humanity can build. No one will ever again mistake our diplomatic efforts for weakness." The dedication ceremony took place exactly 1 year after Minho's murder. Representatives from over 200 species attended, arriving in ships that filled the space around the new station. Many of these aliens had previously dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers. Now they competed for the honor of speaking with human diplomats. Admiral Kim Do-jin stood at the podium in the station's main assembly hall, looking out at an audience that represented most of the known galaxy. The same aliens who had once ignored human communications now hung on his every word. Ambassador Lee Min-ho came to this system with hope in his heart and peace in his mind, the Admiral began. He believed that understanding between species was possible. He died because others mistook our desire for peace as weakness. The audience was completely silent. Many of the alien diplomats had seen the recordings of the human fleet's devastating assault on Kalarian forces. They understood that they were listening to representatives of the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. Let this station serve as a reminder, Do-jin continued. Humanity prefers diplomacy. We would rather build than destroy, create rather than conquer. But we are very, very good at the alternative. Behind him, a holographic display showed the human fleet at full strength, hundreds of warships that had been hidden throughout the solar system, weapons that could crack planets and soldiers trained to fight in ways that no alien species had ever imagined. The message was clear without being spoken: attack humanity's diplomats at your own risk. In the year since the war's end, dozens of species had requested formal alliances with Earth. Trade agreements poured in from across the galaxy as aliens, who had previously considered humans beneath their notice, now competed for human friendship and protection. The Zaxian Federation, longtime enemies of the former Kalarian Empire, had immediately signed a mutual defense pact with Earth. The Crystalline Collective offered to share their advanced shield technology in exchange for human medical knowledge. Even the mysterious Void Runners, who rarely spoke to anyone, had sent envoys requesting meetings with human representatives. President Park Sora smiled as she watched the ceremony from her office on Earth. Around her, displays showed human colonies thriving on dozens of worlds, protected by the most advanced defense network in known space. The rare minerals from former Kalarian territory were fueling expansion beyond humanity's wildest dreams. Madam President, her aide Kim Yuna announced, "We have 17 new requests for diplomatic meetings this week. The hegemony of Scales wants to discuss a trade agreement, and the floating cities of Nexus are offering to share their terraforming technology." "Schedule them all," Park replied, "but make sure Admiral Do-jin's fleet is visible during the negotiations. Some lessons need to be reinforced. The galaxy had learned that Earth only needed one reason to go to war. The Kalarians had provided it and paid the price. Now every species in known space understood that humanity's preference for peace came from a position of unassailable strength. The age of human diplomacy had begun, backed by the knowledge that those who harmed Earth's ambassadors would face the consequences. Ambassador Lee Min-ho's death had not been in vain. It had taught the galaxy to respect humanity's peaceful intentions and fear their military capabilities. The end.